Well, welcome to the final panel, everyone. I'm Justin Bassey, the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, and I think we've got a fabulous way to end the dialogue panels today. A great way to wrap up by looking to the future. But first, to recap, as globalisation gathered speed through the Cold War, a dominant view emerged that interconnectedness through trade was an inherent good for society and would mean less conflict. In recent years, it was realised that once interconnectedness becomes economic dependency, a power imbalance forms, which, when coupled with different value sets and strategic objectives, enables coercion and conflict short of war, or, as we've seen through Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, even war itself. We seem to be going through the exact same scenario now with technology. An overwhelming view that the interconnectedness enabled by tech advancement is an inherent positive. And indeed, we have all gained economic prosperity from the new technological age. But are we again seeing this interconnectedness turn into tech dependency that, if combined with a different value set and strategic objectives, will enable coercion at a supercharged level across entire societies if not addressed? To answer this and many other tech future challenges, it's great to welcome the esteemed panel, the Indian Foreign Secretary, Vinay Kwatra, Gundarera, Parliamentary Secretary, Latvia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Jane Hull-Lute, former Deputy Secretary of the US Department of Homeland Security, Ike Wilson, President, Joint Special Operations University, and Reinhard Bütikofer, Member of the European Parliament. Let's get straight into it. Reinhard, to you first. Unusually, for a European Member of Parliament, you actually have quite a large following in Australia, in the Indo-Pacific, largely because for many years you've been calling out the authoritarian regimes in Moscow and Beijing for their human rights abuses, for their abuse of technology, and you've been warning the world for years about the dangers of science and tech collaboration with authoritarian regimes, as well as the reach of authoritarian regimes into democratic societies, including by exporting their malign use of technology. So what does the future look like if democratic governments and societies view technology only through a commercial lens and not as a values-based platform that can be used to further national strategic objectives?
It's always difficult to make predictions when they concern the future, but in a time of revolutionary developments, changes, it's particularly difficult. So I have taken recourse to two great Americans. There are two options. Yogi Berra said, "The future ain't what it used to be." But I would side with George W. Bush, who said, "The future will be better tomorrow." I think we do have a good future ahead of us, but only under one very important strategic condition: that we understand that the framing, the political, the cultural, the philosophical framing of our battle against authoritarian regimes makes all of the difference. If we're being perceived as defending the traditional privileges of the industrialized North against those that would want to rise in the rest of the world, we'll go down the drain. If, however, and that means we cannot just pursue an anti-China or anti-Russia policy. We have to formulate positive goals. We have to talk about how we want to contribute to a transformative development in international relations with regard to sustainability, particularly, of course, concerning also the climate crisis, how we would contribute global public goods, how we would partner. Having said that, I believe it's high time that we wake up. In some of the competition. We have been asleep at the wheel. Your institute just published an analysis of technology leadership across 44 different sectors of advanced technologies, and the basic, there are two basic results. One is that of 44 sectors, China leads in 37, and the US in 7. But then there is a second result. The aggregate contribution of democracies is still very strong, because it's not just the US, it's also India, it's Italy, it's the UK, it's Korea and Germany. Those are the most prominent contributors, not recognizing the dangers that are obviously implicit in that situation, would amount to continued unilateral disarmament on the technology sector. But teaming up, I think we could indeed shape a better future for us and many other partners. And I believe that protecting our own industrial base is not the only important thing. Of course, also cooperating in developing, for instance, raw material partnerships. We in the West are dependent on Chinese processing of critical raw materials. With regard to rare earth, it's over 95%. China imports those rare earth from all around the globe, processes it, and turns it into a leverage for economic coercion, into an economic chokehold. But why are we not smart enough to team up with countries like Namibia and others that are resource rich but do not have the industry to process? Why don't we help financing that development, and on that basis also benefit, because we're not dependent on just one source? Let me stop there.
Well, it's a very good place to stop with a very good question. Thank you for the reference to the critical tech tracker. It is both alarming, but as you say, shows the benefits of partnerships and collective action. Jane, can we look further at the points that Reinhard raised and ask how, and indeed if, democratic countries can successfully balance the benefits of our open societies with mitigating the vulnerabilities, including the ability for authoritarian regimes to not only control their own systems, but message disinformation into ours?
I think governments are really struggling with their role when it comes to tech. I think there are three questions surrounding it. I use these typically in the context of cybersecurity, but I think it applies to tech more generally. How do we architect systems we can trust from components we can't? How do we safeguard information, our identities, our communities, our societies, in an open exchange of information where data centricity is a reality, but data liquidity is an imperative? And what should the role of government be? And governments have been struggling with their role with respect to tech, because the private sector, indeed individual human beings, have moved into this space. They're not waiting around to be told what to do by governments. If we just look at the question of cybersecurity and the technology associated with keeping us safe online, because the internet is older than most of the world's planet, most of the people on the world's planet, yet there's not a single thing we can do online secure and safe and confident in that safety and security. Why not? Because for a long time, businesses, if you were attacked from a cyber point of view, let's say over the past 10 or 15 years, business treated it as a nuisance. You treat it as a nuisance, the cost of doing business. The cybersecurity industry treated it as a money-making machine, because all of us were special flowers that needed special care and feeding, not really acknowledging that, frankly, we're all on the same internet, we're all seeing the same level of threats. And governments treated it like an intel program. And governments still treat a lot of technology and technology development as highly compartmentalized intel programs. And the fact of the matter is, things are happening too fast in terms of development, commercialization, and scale, that governments really now are only market participants. So I think there are two areas specifically where governments have a challenge, and we have a right to expect that they will do better and do more. One area is exponential weaponry. This is weaponry that has you have the ability to exponentially expand the lethal effects of weapons in individual hands. This is a real and present danger. This technology currently exists. People around the world are using it. Are hostile governments using it? Yes. Are gangs, organized crime using it? Yes. Do governments have a handle on it? No. And the other area, as you mentioned, Justin, is dis and misinformation. The public now has a right to know what's going on. What do they expect from their governments? They expect governments to simply tell the truth. Governments are very often telling the truth, but they're not doing it simply. And publics expect governments to simply tell the truth in a timely way and not get too cute about it. But I think governments also have a right to expect from the public that the public wants to be informed, not be entertained, so they can focus on that job.
Thanks, Jane. I think it absolutely shows the importance of the combination of capability and narrative, that to be competitive here, we need to be able to do both well. And when you say that governments need to do more, probably the last decade or so, we've seen a number of democratic governments decide to step away from technological interest because of a fear of stifling innovation. But we need them to be a part of our technological future and not have a hands-off approach. So thank you very much for that. Ike, can I turn to you all the way down there? Keen to discuss how tech could be used in the future. Is technology fundamentally changing our understanding of war, including by bringing new players into operational activities? And will we see an even greater divide between how democratic nations and authoritarian regimes use technology in conflict?
I think any conversation, any deliberation on matters relating to war and warfare need to begin with an appreciation of the political object, right? The political imperatives behind the use and utility, if there ever is one, of war and warfare. What I'd like to say first off in that vein is that we are at a moment of dramatic change. What we are facing geostrategically, geopolitically, is nothing less than a return, and it is a return. There are new aspects, particularly in the technological realm, but at its fundamental level, it is a return to a time where we face dramatic disruptive change, and a change of a type, scope, and scale that outpaces organizations and organizational leadership's ability to first see and understand the consequences of the change, to adapt, innovate to those changes, and to develop solutions towards those changes. Typically in historical cycles of these types of changes in the realm of peace and warfare, the tendency is to move away from multilateral and collective action for defense and security, and to move further back into what I would call we're facing today, a 21st century neo-mercantilist reaction to a dramatic global change in the character of geopolitical competition that frankly all of the nation states of the globe, particularly democracies, are having a hard time and playing a bit of a catch-up game in trying to understand. Whenever those moments of strategic ambiguity arrive, the tendency is to go into the proverbial fetal position and to seek self-help solutions, and it creates a very much of a paradox. It creates a paradox where the nature of compound security dilemmas that these types of times historically generate, and typically you see it through the mechanisms and the technological advancements in war and warfare, right? We can talk about this going back to the times of the Mongols and the development of the stirrup on the saddle, right? We can go back to the times of the invention of gunpowder, from smoothbore riflery to rifled musketry, and every one of these technological evolutions and revolutions creates a lag between societies and governments' social compacts with one another, unilaterally and collectively, and that lagging behind the nature of the change. These tend to be very dangerous moments. They tend to be ripe for metastasizing the potential for wars of all types, scope, and scale, particularly towards the high end of what we'd call epochal wars or great power conflicts. And I believe that's the position we're in today. But I would say the nature of war itself has not changed. I'm one who believes that the nature of war has not changed. If we believe that nature at a fundamental level of war, the nature of war is an act or any type of act to compel other to your will, we still live in that world. We have a lot of much more dangerous and complicated instruments to bring that compulsion together. And again, the nature of these technological changes are driving us more towards, have a tendency to drive us more towards unilateral, independent solutions to our own security dilemmas, when nothing will solve these dilemmas other than collective action. So I want to go back to Reinhardt's comment on the front end. These moments are times for particularly democratic states and communities of democracies to go back to fundamentals. It's easy to approach these in a reactionary mode, in a reactionary understanding and mindset, but these moments drive us and demand that we get back to our own fundamentals of values and to adopt positive aims, strategic approaches to solutions. I'm a strong believer that in moments like this, which are dangerous times, opportunities also ride on the dangerous winds. As the Chinese stated in two brushstrokes. Crisis is opportunity riding on the dangerous winds. I think that moments like these bring us back to fundamental truths. Sadly, tragically, the Russian war on the Ukraine is probably our necessary teacher of the collective community of democratic nation states. If we think about where we were 12, 13 months ago, we were not united. We were moving more towards that mercantilistic, beggar thy neighbor. I'm going to solve my own individual, independent security dilemmas by any means, to include through politics of other means, war and warfare. We were moving in the opposite direction as a community of nation states. I always hate to give the environment or an adversary any type of credit for an evolution in a positive aims direction, but we really have come a long way in the last 12, 13 months, grounded on the will of the Ukrainian people, and really have had a help, sadly, through Putin's Russia, of re-identifying the core principles of collective defense, collective security of an international environment of democratic states. Getting that political object right, first and foremost, all other factors follow. All other factors follow. The technological revolutions, we are playing a catch-up game, and the dangers of the emergent tech is that it outpaces our ability to think and to react. All the more reason to move into multilateral and collective action. I think Reinhardt made that statement very well up front. So in summary, no real change in the nature of war. War is as it's always been and probably always will be. The character of the thing has changed, and we have to collectively understand our place in this moment of change, and that unilateral solutions, while they can allow us to enter into and towards actions, will never solve these types of compound security problems. I think I'll pause there, and hopefully that's enough to elicit some comments.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, thanks, Ike. And I think the two key principles there, the need for collective action, but also your reference to needing to sometimes just go back to fundamentals and our values. So often debate now seems to ignore values, just concentrate on interests, without actually saying, well, we can have both values and interests. That's, I think, a very important point.
Justin, if I could just say one thing on that point. We've made, over the last 22 years in particular, we've made a grand distinction between values and interests, either or. In a world of compound everything, we have to change the conjunction. It's not an or conjunction.
Yeah.
Unless we forfeit initiative, and then we find ourselves in a reactionary mode when we are only left with or propositions. Seek the and that's what collective security and defense is all about. Our strongest interests, our most vital interests collectively and individually as nation states must be our values. They are one and the same. And when they are one and the same, that's a very difficult proposition to defeat.
Yeah, no, well
Thanks.
said. Gunda, if I can turn to you, talking about values, there's no doubt that the Baltic countries have shown the strength of understanding their values, and you've had more experience than most facing threats from a larger country that develops and uses technology maliciously. The rest of the world probably didn't learn the lessons of Russia's cyber attacks on Estonia, for example, or how to mitigate the threat of aggression and coercion. Do you think the Russian war on Ukraine is another wake-up call for democratic countries? And what do you think those lessons should be?
Justin, I have to say that these wake-up calls or those, I must say, loud rings, bells have been ringing constantly and already since the very beginning of the 1990s. Remember Georgia 2008, Crimea 2014, or the Salisbury's poisoning. Let's remember Anna Politkovskaya, let's remember Alexei Navalny, rape, torture, deportations, crime, violence. This is what's going on right now in the territory of Ukraine. I've been in Kiev, and it was during massive shelling. I've seen dead bodies on the streets, destructed infrastructure. I think it is high time for the international society to acknowledge the ugly truth. Russia is an authoritarian regime. It is an aggressor. This is the first lesson to be learned. And second, speaking about the technologies and war, because this panel is specifically devoted to the tech issue, the sanctions against Russia have been designed specifically to strangle the aggressor's abilities to finance its war machine. And as we see it, these sanctions actually already have caused a significant damage to Russia's military industry, its military capabilities, or put it in a simple way, Russia is running out of technology right now. Well, I'm speaking, for instance, about the microchips for precision technologies or combat drones, ballistic missiles, and so. Therefore, we call for the military technology, for the dual-use technology not to be supplied to Russia. It is, well, and actually it includes a wide range of products, including, you know, drones, chemicals, or vehicles, and so on and so forth. It is so important not support Russia in any way, and not to support its capabilities to arm itself and to finance the aggression against the Ukraine. You know, there is lies, big lies, and then the Russian propaganda. It's so obvious who's the aggressor, and it's so obvious who is defending its country, its people, its sovereignty. Therefore, it's so crucial to stop Russia's aggression against Ukraine, because, you know, also other aggressors may look at the international response and use it as an encouragement to continue such kind of war of aggression or aggression crimes in other regions of the world. Therefore, yes, I'm sure that peace and justice will be achieved in Ukraine, and I'm certain that the path to international accountability will go through The Hague.
Thanks, Gunda. Can I turn to a very patient Foreign Secretary? I want to dive into India specifically, seeing as though India is really undergoing a significant digital transformation. Could you briefly tell us about India's digital transformation story and specifically what the role of government is in it, given we've been talking here about a lot about the private-public sector divide. So how do we have a digital transformation here in India, and what is the role of government?
You know, technology and the way we look at it, we have I would say in many ways compared to what I've heard, and what I'm going to say will probably resonate with a couple of panelists. A couple of them may find it contrarian, but technology in itself is what it is. The nature of technology does not actually define its use. The user case of technology is a function of what are your foundational parameters to look at technology. So in the Indian context, fundamentally when we look at technology, we essentially have two set of binary foundations. And the entire template of digital transformation in India is pegged on pretty much those two binaries. The first binary is, again, and this draws and then in turn permeates into our own values and ethos of democracy. So the first binary that we always look at, and this pretty much defines our worldview towards technology, digital being a part of it, is open versus close. So should the digital technology world or technology world per se be close or open? We have very consciously, deliberately gone for openness in the use of technology, more specifically in this case, in the use of digital. That's binary number one. Binary number two, which forms the foundation, is public good versus private gain. There again, because of our value system and ethos, we have gone for public good. Just as the physical infrastructure essentially is a public good made by the government, digital infrastructure in our context is a public good. It's treated as such. And it is based on these foundations that the digital technology world was integrated into our society in all domains of our society, which resulted in, 4 to 5 key transformations, I would say. You mentioned about the role of the government. The role of the government in this has been very clear, and a leadership role under the leadership of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. He has been, his fundamental belief is that technology can serve a transformative role in the delivery of governance. As simple as that. You talked of public-private divergence. I would say in India there is public-private convergence in the use of digital technology, not divergence. So if I was to briefly tell you 4 or 5 key transformations in India in the field of digital technology, where government has had a very prominent role and citizen has a very prominent interface. First is the accountability transformation. Total transparency, remarkable increase in transparency, huge reduction in corruption, and open source nature of it, which has developed trust in the people about the technology. You triangulate these three and you have got a resultant ecosystem of technology use in India, which has led to huge accountability of the governance, of the government systems, And government has been in forefront in promoting this one. That has been the first transformation. The second transformation has been empowerment transformation. How the use of technology in delivering the governance has empowered people. Now, to the academics and to the statisticians, this may look just like a number, but its impact on the ground has been huge. So I'll give you just one particular data set, which actually was one of the first data set to be built up when the digital transformation for the public governance and public goods started in India, which is the data set relating to financial inclusion, essentially, including those segments of the population which haven't had access to financial systems. So we have roughly 480 odd million beneficiaries who, through the process of technology, who were financially in the periphery of the systems, were included and mainstreamed as part of financial inclusion process. Now that has had a huge empowerment impact on the ground. So much so that today they have access to some of the ancillary and allied services which were otherwise not available. I'll give you a very simple example. If I did not have a bank account, if I did not have the record of my financial transactions, I would not get credit facility from the financial institutions. After the financial inclusion of this large mass of people, after the massive buildup of digital payment platform, and I'll give one example of that later on, we have a system that if I'm a very small shopkeeper with a, let's say, a monthly, revenue stream of equivalent of, let's say, $300, $400, a banking system can track that through the platforms and extend to me the credit facility. And I was, till just a few years ago, excluded from that financial credit system. So it's a huge empowerment.
It's true.
Empowerment system that has resulted.
I think just before you go on to that, I think Reinhard, you had a comment.
I wanted to comment, sir, on your statement that technology can help you go to heaven or go to hell. It depends on, and I agree with that.
Okay.
But I think we should look at standards that govern technologies.
Yeah.
And their societies imprint their values on technology. I'll give you an example. About 2 or 3 years ago, in the ITU, International Telecoms Union, Huawei and the Chinese government advocated for a new standard for the Internet, Internet 2.0, and they would include in the standardization a sensor switch, which they thought was necessary for the new standard.
Okay.
That's an example where standards do influence the technology by imprinting our values.
Your point on standards is important. It actually leads, Vinay, I think, to an important question that I think a number of people in the audience would be keen to hear from you, that when you're talking about standards and governance values, Reinhard, the digital transformation that you talked about so well, Foreign Secretary, has happened at the same time that India has prohibited a full range of Chinese technologies, including, for example, TikTok. So with Americans and Europeans and Australian on the panel here with you, how are you able to provide us with advice on how our countries should be looking at these Chinese platforms and whether we should be looking to do the same, have the same approach as India?
No, I thought I ran out of time, otherwise I had one additional point to make, but I somehow got a sense that my time had run out. I had the last point to make.
Keeping it
which is,
interactive, yeah.
You know, but since point of standards has been made, you know, as I mentioned right in the beginning, one of the key foundations for us to have built this digital ecosystem has been, as I said, open versus close and public versus good. Ours is a combination of public and open. As a result of that, in the process, yes, it will create millionaires along the way as you go along. But for us, the principal target is the public good, public governance. And that's the third part I wanted to come, because this has been mentioned by panelists in one way or another, which is our template of digital transformation also offers a choice to other developing countries. So if you talk of standards, standards of technology on which it is built is one part of it. But on those standards, what kind of service delivery platforms you build, what kind of service delivery standards you build is up to you. That choice is yours. Hardware choice, if you do not have this, and every society, let's face it, has a certain degree of engineering capability which is inbuilt into it. We are acutely conscious of what our strengths and that field are, but we are acutely conscious that if there is a hardware layer, let's say of 4G, 5G you mentioned, 6G on the horizon, 7G not too far away, people are already talking about 8G in some sense. All right, the standard matrix will evolve as you go along. Artificial intelligence standards would be another one. Their responsible use, their ethical use will be another one. What I'm saying is we are offering a choice matrix of a digital transformation platform wherein if a country wants to, and this is again a part of our ethos, share and care. You want to use this platform, pretty much no cost, because it is public good and it is built on openness. To your specific question on what's the interface that government has to balance the availability of information, availability of misinformation, spread of disinformation, fake information. That is a balance which each government, it's a constant thing. Each government has to continue to address that within a given societal matrix. So what you saw vis-a-vis the banning of various Chinese apps is no different in that sense. So I would say, you know, and the last point relating to how, you know, technology would perhaps change the way we go forward. I think it's going to be a function of whether our economic models and we as society, are we technology resistant? Are our economic models more amenable to technology adaptability? So if my economic model is purely based on manufacturing, and suddenly manufacturing is open to a burst of automation, then obviously I'll have a massive disruption within my system.
Okay.
But if I have a service economy, it'll probably boom.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes to go. I do have a final question for the panel, but does anyone have a question from the audience? Please.
As it was mentioned that emerging technologies are outpacing our ability to react or act. So my question is, how do you see the role of norms or ethical principles in governing technologies such as AI that are unpredictable to great extent and can be highly disruptive at global level? And who all could be the effective actors for this?
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead.
Very short on the dilemma public versus private, open versus closed. In the last session we heard a lot about UPI, and UPI is almost open source, but not entirely. So far only for licensed entities. Maybe you could elaborate on why that is. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Ethical principles of AI. Okay.
30 seconds, come on.
That's a tricky one.
Again, back to fundamentals. My role here is to play the former military person and the person who relates military and technological advancements in the military realm to governance and politics, particularly for democracies. I would say in that sense, ethics of all instruments of any type of force, military and non-military, are essential thing. The runoff of emergent technology has really challenged the fundamental ideas of things like ranging from just war, what constitutes a just action of an instrument of force of any type, what constitutes justness in action, particularly in the realm of the politics of war and warfare. I think we have the takeoff of technology demands that we go back to the most fundamental principles of use and utility and identity of these technological instruments, and we have to put instruments back into the purview and control of civil societies through their social compacts, right? So ethics of technology, very strategic and a very strategic, ambiguous moment that we're facing today, and particularly with the fast pace of technological advancements, AI, machine learning, chat GPT, and other similar bots, challenging our ability to keep pace with machines that are thinking beyond our social and societal controls. So I think this is going to be one of the fundamental things that we have to collectively come back to, and to bring it back to what the Secretary was talking about. The most ethical thing that we can do is get technology back into a construct of public good, and that's an essential thing for democratic republics. I'll pause there. I'm not a technological expert. I will say one more thing real quickly. Civil-military relations, and I meant to say this in my opener, I think another fundamental thing, particularly for democracies, is the essentiality of us to go back and reaffirm our fundamental core values in the relationship of any instrument of force, particularly the military force, particularly military force hyper-enabled by technological advancements, in a subordination, a reaffirmation of the subordination of the military back to civil society, and to recalibrate those controls.
Yeah.
I'll pause
Thanks,
there.
Zach.
Thanks.
And before I turn to the Foreign Secretary, I might seek some leave to finish off with a question perhaps for both Jane and Gunda. I was going to ask the entire panel, but I might stick with you. You can think about it as the Foreign Secretary is answering his question of, if we are back here in 12 months' time talking about tech challenges and tech threats, what do you think those tech threats and challenges will be in 2024? Foreign Secretary.
Thank you. I definitely have a longish comment to give on ethics of AI, but I'll bypass that, so it's a shortage of time. But to the question on public good of the UPI, I would just give you 2 data points. When the UPI started, when it was introduced, we only had 35 banks whose payment applications used to run through the UPI platform. Today we have 383 banks. When it started, its volume of transactions was roughly $100 million in a month. I think today it's touching roughly $1 trillion plus in terms of transaction. It was only confined to India when it was introduced. Today, its payment interface, it's a UPI is a interface. You can build any layer of platforms on it. Today, it's movable to 10 countries and expanding. So it is a public good in that sense that, yes, there is a regulatory framework around which you onboard a particular platform into it, but it is very open in terms of its interoperability with other systems. It is not a closed system in that sense. To your questions on the trends, naturally the artificial intelligence is one trend, but I think the other trend is the use of AI in different applications. I'll give you one example, very relevant for a country like ours. How do I detect disease trends in data, for example? It's something which is of tremendous value to developed and developing economies both. How do you look at publicly available data? And today I have a data set of 1.3 odd billion people which is available, mobile phones available, bank accounts available, every transaction which is there is available as a data set. Now, can I configure it to figure out what could be the evolving disease trends in my society and sort of provide for it. But going forward, I think artificial intelligence, I mean, ChatGPT is most often talked about. There are n number of them. You go and look at Adept AI, for example. It's another remarkable platform which allows your AI to be brought to your devices. So you can interface your device with an AI platform which is not on your device, which is outside, and configure whichever choices you have. I think that is going to be the challenge, but I think a very exciting challenge. I firmly believe it will open up far more opportunities, including for job creation. I mean, you have a huge aggregator economy currently. People thought when Uber came, the taxis would disappear. Instead, you have an explosion of taxi demand and multiple set of taxis. The entire aggregator system of economy is principally based on these data sets. So I think it's going to be a very exciting field for technology. Technology is always exciting. What you make of it is up to you.
Thanks, Boris. It is excellent to see someone excited and looking to the opportunities. Jane, are you also excited, or are you a bit worried?
So, I mean, how can you not be excited after that? So you asked, what technology will we be talking about a year from now? I have no idea, but I do believe that the problems we will be dealing with even 2 years from now have not been invented yet. And so how will we respond? Technology emerges in one of three ways. Okay, maybe 300, but I could only think of three, right? By accident, by adaptation, and by audacity. Accidents. Some guy was walking through the woods and had things stick to his clothes, and he invented Velcro. GPS, you know where it came from? It came from some soldier in the field with an eye-safe laser rangefinder, a radio, and a compass. Adaptation. Audacity. And it takes audacity to cope with today's world, right? And there are two approaches. Let's solve this problem, right? How do we solve problems? You know, what problems need solving? Let's adapt technology to it. The other way to do is to think about what would be cool. Apple wasn't solving a problem when it put our entire music collection in our pockets. There were guys in Cupertino saying, gee, wouldn't it be cool if we could carry around our music and have it anytime we wanted? That's pretty cool. So I'm convinced and I'm excited that whatever problems will come our way in 1 or 2 years, they haven't been invented yet. But do I think that we can adapt, be audacious, and have happy accidents? Yes, I do.
Fabulous.
Happy accidents.
Fabulous answer, and it also reinforces Ike's earlier point about the needing to adapt while not losing our fundamentals, and we can, again, do both. Gunda.
Well, I see that you're collecting ideas for the next conference,
That's
and
right.
I must say that's a proper and effective way how to run the conference business. Well, actually, the job starts the next day. When
I am stealing a lot of ideas, that's right. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, actually, I fully agree with what foreign secretary said about the very nature of technology. Well, technology is neither good nor bad. It is neutral. It is in our hands what we are doing with it. Therefore, if you're talking about next conferences or years, I must say that first of all, we shouldn't be afraid of technology because, yes, if we look at the whole history of humanity, it is a history of technological development on the one hand. But on the other hand, I think that we heard lots of concerns and also challenges during this panel. Therefore, I would say that conceptually, we should also address the so-called Oppenheimer's dilemma or Oppenheimer's tragedy, which means that while moving forward with the tech development, we should try to avoid the situation that also a huge disruptive potential is created that can lead to a real human tragedy. Well, we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemics that the disinformation, a really serious and dangerous disinformation was spread with the help of technology, with via social media. It acted, you know, like it created an effect of bushfire, where not even speaking about the potential and threats of using AI in the military. Therefore, yes, I fully agree that we cannot predict the challenges we will be addressing, but yes, we heard actually a lot of concerns during the panel.
Fabulous. Reinhard, I started with you. I might ask you to give a 1-minute view on your views on trends.
Well, I dare making 3 precise predictions that can be falsified. Not about technology, but about technology policy. Number 1, after much controversy between the EU and the United States, the EU is finally tilting towards adopting the American approach with regard to export controls of sensitive technologies. And we will do that in a fast legislative process by reforming the investment screening instrument. Second, after amending its own anti-sanctions legislation, the Chinese have now zeroed in on one Korean and one Swedish company because they have applied American sanctions, and they're now being sued in court. Third, because the Czech president has met the new Taiwan president, 1.4 billion Chinese citizens are so enraged that all of a sudden China cannot export solar wafers to the EU anymore.
That's interesting.
All right.
Really
Well, we will wait to see how many are correct, Reinhard. I'm well and truly over time, and thank you for staying all this time, and hopefully you've learned a lot from the esteemed panel on where we are with technology, where we've been, and most importantly, where we're going. There are lots of threats, lots of challenges, but I think what has been said, including by the Foreign Secretary and by Jane, is that there's a lot to be excited about as well. So please join me in thanking the great panel.